You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. So on the last episode, I shared with you guys about my move to Tennessee, and this is totally new for me. We're in this new house, new town. Being so new, it was such a blessing to get connected with Melissa initially online. And then when I got here, I'd been here about a week, and Melissa said, I'm going to have a luncheon, and I'm going to invite a bunch of ladies that you're going to want to meet because you just love them. And so today we're going to talk to Lindsey, who was one of the moms that was at that initial luncheon. So Lindsey, you were like one of my welcoming committee. And one of the first things you did, you said, I'm going to have you guys over for dinner. So I think we might have even been here in the state for barely 2 weeks.
Okay.
When you had us over for dinner.
Oh.
And we got to meet your family, and you were such a beautiful hostess, and we just felt at home, and we just had a good time. And it was there when I got to your house that and met your kids, you started to share your story and your story of adoption. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, she needs to come on the podcast. I should tell her that I have a podcast. She needs to come share her story with people. And initially, when we did that, I was thinking October was Down Syndrome Awareness Month. And I thought, oh, if I can do this really quick and we can do that for October. But it was a real tight time frame. And then you said, well, when I told you about the podcast, you said, well, we don't have to do it in October for Down syndrome. We could do it in November because that's National Adoption Awareness Month. So I went, bingo, let's do that. And so here we are. And so obviously you're here today to tell me about your adoptions. And typically I might ask somebody to introduce me to their family and just, who your whole family is. But in your case, I think it might be better for you to introduce your family as we move along.
Okay.
So if you just want to start wherever in the beginning and jump in and introduce us as everyone joined your family.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm Lindsey, and thank you for having me. It's a blessing to be here. And back to that ladies' luncheon real quick. One thing that drew me to you was hearing the story about how God brought you all out here to Tennessee. I could relate to that because 9 years ago, the Lord told us to move to Tennessee while we were living in Virginia. And just what you were able to describe and share with how God had ordered your steps and brought you out here was such an encouragement to me. And just, I guess, an Ebenezer, a reminder to me to reflect upon what God had done in our family 9 years ago, bringing us out here, which ultimately led us on our adoption journey, which is why I'm here today. So my husband is Ryan, and we met in college and got married right after college and lived in our little college town in Northern Virginia for about 12 years. And, at that point, we started to hear God say, you need to move to Tennessee. And that did not make any sense to us. Ryan had a great job. We had 4 kids at the time, but there was just this tremendous pressure upon us that we knew we were supposed to move. And so Ryan began looking for churches in Tennessee, and then looking for jobs around there. He wanted to find a place where we could get plugged in with a church family and then find a place for him to work around that. And so I was thankful God led him in that way. And God gave him a great job. He sold our house in a month in Virginia, and we moved out here with 4 kids. Andrew was 7 at the time. Benjamin was 5. Evelyn had just turned 4, and Elliot was 2. And so we came to Tennessee excited to be here, but wondering what was God's purpose in bringing us here. As a young girl, I had always thought about adoption. I always wanted to adopt. I didn't know what that would look like practically. Ryan and I had many talks about that while we were in a relationship before we got married. And then once we got married, our birth children just started coming. Yep. And we were not purposeful in pursuing adoption as our birth children were being added to our family. And around year 8 or 9, it started to come up again. And most of my kids are between 18 and 20 months apart. And so Ryan said, if we're going to adopt, we need to pray about this purposefully and think about what steps we need to take to do it, because it's not just going to fall in our laps. And so we got out here to Tennessee, and we found an agency in Nashville, which is, not in the town that we live in, but it was the closest one, a Christian agency. And we just decided to go to an information meeting and see what it was about. Is God really asking us to do this? And as we were doing that, we were feeling God ask us to adopt domestically and to be part of an open relationship with birth mom, birth family. Oftentimes there's birth grandparents that love these kids and want to be involved in their lives. And we just were very excited for that and wanted that. So we pursued a domestic adoption with our agency. Part of the adoption process is sitting down with your adoption counselor and filling out mountains of paperwork. More paperwork than I ever knew was possible. And a couple of those pieces of paper really shook us to our core. They presented us with a piece of paper and asked us to check boxes of things that we would accept from a child or even from their birth mother in terms of history, substance use, or different sorts of diagnosis that the birth family may have, a diagnosis that the child would have. What would we accept? And that just really startled us, because if I was carrying a child, I was not checking any boxes for what I would accept from a child I was carrying. It was just a child that God had fearfully and wonderfully made and put in my womb and purposed for our family. And it was very unnerving. And so we prayed about it. We took it home and prayed about it, and we returned the form blank. And we said, we will accept anything. Because if the Lord has a child for us through adoption, then he has a child for us through adoption. And there's not a box that we can check or not check that will thwart his hand in that. And so we really just wanted to keep our hands open to what God had for us. I don't think I ever expected that it would be a child with special needs. I didn't go around thinking that because we hadn't checked any boxes that we were now going to get a child with special needs. But I just, I guess one of the boxes is race. What race will you accept? And just things like that are, I don't know, maybe it's not startling to everyone. It was just startling to me. And so in May of 2014, we got a phone call from our agency that there was a little boy that had been born and was in a NICU in one of Nashville's hospitals. And he was born with quite a few complications back in April. And there had been a family that was chosen for him. And when he was born with those complications, the family felt like they were not his family, like they could not care for him the way that he needed to. And so our agency was looking for families that were open to his needs. And they were going to then present those families to birth mom to choose another family. And so our agency was asking us if we were interested in that. And we were like, of course. They show you your book, your family book that you create to the birth mother. And she was able then to choose our family. And she did choose our family. And at the end of the week, we got a phone call that we were this little baby boy's family. And that we were going to meet him the very next day.
How fast can you get in the car and drive to Nashville?
Yes. And so we got there to the NICU. And we didn't know much about his story. We knew that he had been without oxygen for a while. At birth, he had a very traumatic birth, that he was not eating by mouth, that he'd had some seizure difficulties. But we walked into that NICU, and I just cannot believe how beautiful he was to behold. And I just kept saying, this is him? This is him? And he was laying there swaddled in a sweet little turtle blanket that his primary care nurse had given him. And he was just absolutely perfect. He was absolutely perfect. And me and Ryan and our 4 children, they let us all go into the NICU. At that point, we had to wash our hands for 3 minutes each and wear all these robes. And I say that was our little Asher. Asher was just the gentle giant of the NICU. He was about 10 pounds at that point, and a lot of babies in the NICU are really teeny tiny. And he was just this sweet little gentle giant laying there. But over the next few hours, we would have meetings with his specialists that had been there with him since he'd been born, and that helped to resuscitate him and keep him alive. And at the end of those meetings, one of the doctors looked at us and said, okay, so what is your decision? And we were like, our decision about what? Are you going to take him or not? And we were like, oh, he's ours. Of course. And I think they thought after hearing all of that, that we would not choose to take that on. But upon seeing him, he was our little boy. He was a little Morris. My son Benjamin stood over the side of his NICU bed with a little stuffed monkey, and Benjamin just had tears streaming down his face. And I said, Benjamin, are you okay? I wasn't sure if he was unnerved with all the cords and machinery and stuff. And he said, no, Mom, these are just happy tears.
Oh. It was a done deal. He's your baby.
He
is your baby.
From the phone call, he was mine. And so we did. We brought little Asher home, and Asher does have cerebral palsy. Okay. He's tube fed. He is not verbal at this point with words. I always tell people he speaks with his eyes. If he wants something, he looks at it, and then looks at me, or whoever he wants at that time, he will lock his eyes on. Asher is 6, and this is the very first year that Asher has ever sat. And that is just miraculous. The specialist told us that was not possible based upon his brain scans and things when we left the hospital, and the amount or lack of amount of brain activity that he had. But he's so engaging. He laughs and smiles, and God is continuing to develop him for his glory, not according to anybody else's timetable or, when you go in for a well check at a doctor's office, they want to check off these milestones. Asher doesn't meet those milestones, but he meets the milestones that God has for him. And so our family just, oh my goodness, we just love Asher so much. And
so did you feel like, okay, we've done it. We've done the adoption, and now our family is complete. We will.
No. No. And so I think the thing that changed there is we continued to feel this leading to adopt. Only this time, the Lord was saying, I want you to adopt a child with special needs again. And so I want to speak back to what I said about wanting openness, in a relationship. That's not what God had for us in Asher's adoption. A verse that always encourages me regarding that is Proverbs 16:9. In his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. And I think that God used a desire for an open relationship with a birth family to cause us to pursue a domestic adoption because he had Asher for us. We send communication to Asher's birth family and birth mother, but we don't hear back from them, and that's okay. That's their choice. We just want them to know how loved he is, how treasured he is, and to be able to see pictures of him growing and developing. And there's an open door for them there if that's ever something that they desire. But that is not something that God has opened the door for, even though that was an original desire of my heart. And so I just trust him with that.
And I think that actually you won't know now, but you may never know how much reaching out to in that open adoption touches her heart. She's seeing those pictures, she's reading the letters about his development, and we don't know the work that God's doing in her life. So
that's true.
It's not finished.
Yes.
Which is kind of cool.
Yes. And so God used Asher, this sweet little boy, nonverbal, to just lead our family down this road of special needs adoption. And he's just kind of carried the banner for us. So after we knew we wanted to pursue another special needs adoption, my husband felt strongly that we did not need to wait for another child to be born with special needs, because there were already many, many, many children with special needs in the world that needed homes. And so we just asked God to direct our steps. And that specific year, our agency had launched an initiative called the Bamboo Project in China, which was a specific initiative to get children with Down syndrome adopted. For many, 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 many years, children with Down syndrome in China were just immediately institutionalized and were not given files or even the opportunity to be adopted. It was just assumed that they would not be adopted. And our agency said, give us just a few files and let us see if we can get them homes, and then let's try from there. And they did. And the first round, I think they got 25 files and all the kids were adopted. Our next son was part of the second round, Bamboo Project 2.0. And so we started pursuing this adoption from China of a little one with Down syndrome. And again, we were open. We did not have a gender preference. And because we didn't have a gender preference, they sent us 3 files of little boys, because boys are harder to find homes for in China. And so over that time, these little boys come with little advocacy names from our agency. They give them a little name to go by. It's not their Chinese name. It's not their real name. It's just something to, help personalize them in their story. And we were given 3 files. They were Isaiah, Malachi, and Ishmael. And they were all precious, all beautiful. I would have wanted all of them. Our agency didn't allow that. And China doesn't really either. They don't prefer it. So at the time, our family was reading through Isaiah, and my husband said, I don't have any other way of choosing other than that God providentially had us reading through Isaiah, and I think that's where we need to take the leading from. So we started pursuing Isaiah, and that was ultimately our little Truett.
Yeah, how do you choose? That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's hard. I did want to go back, I feel like, real quick, because I want to talk about Truett's name, but Asher's name is Asher Levi, and then we kept a name from his birth mom, and then Morris. And Asher means happiness, and Levi means joined to. And we just really believe that Asher is happiness that God joined to our family for our good and his glory. And I feel like Asher just lives out that name beautifully. Mm-hmm. Truett is Truett David, just truly beloved, a truly beloved little boy, whom God had a very hard but beautiful story to write for his little life. And he just turned 7 yesterday. So I don't know if you want me to stop there with Truett, or if you want me to keep going with how God gave us the other ones yet, or if you have any other questions.
I think you could just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, just tell us.
Okay.
I mean, that really, to jump forward a little bit, you've adopted 4 children, and they all have very unique stories.
Yes.
So I think you could just share a lot with everyone and encourage us a lot. Okay. So, yeah.
So while in China getting Truett, they were giving us a little tour of the orphanage, which when I say little, I mean very little. It's very guarded and you don't see a lot at all, which makes this next part even more miraculous. I am looking down at my feet and I see Malachi, the other little boy, in one of the files that we had been given. And I recognized him immediately. And got back home, told the kids, of course we were all falling in love with Truett.
Got back home with Truett?
Yes, got back home with Truett. And we're just adjusting to life with him and just, head over heels with this sweet, sweet, sweet little boy. And I tell them that I saw Malachi, and we begin to pray as a family for God to raise up a family for Malachi. It's one thing to see these children's faces on your computer screen, on a flat piece of paper as you're looking through files, and it's another thing to see them in person and to hear where they are and smell where they are and see where they are. And it just changes you. I will never unsee the places where my children lived first. And so over the next few weeks, we were praying, diligently as a family for God to raise up a family for Malachi. Having friends, I'm not on social media, but having friends post his little pictures, places, and just asking, are you his family? Could you be Malachi's family? And several weeks into it, my oldest son, Andrew, and my second oldest son, Benjamin, came to my husband and I separately, and said, I think we are Malachi's family. And while we very much still wanted to adopt again, we weren't expecting that to happen just a few weeks into Truett being home. And so we started having just conversations as a family, like, okay, mommy's divided by 6 right now. What does that look like for mommy to be divided by 7? How are you feeling in the family? Because I think one thing that is important to consider when you're adopting children with different abilities and different challenges, it's a family decision. Obviously, Ryan's the head of our home. Ryan and I together parent and love our children, but it's a family consideration, right, to pursue something like that. And so we wanted to have our children's input. Not that would be our decision, but we wanted to have their input. And we said, we want you guys to take some time to think about some things that could be really awesome about bringing Malachi home, and some things that could be really hard about bringing Malachi home. And we got together again and listening to them, the only thing that any of them would ever regret, they said, was growing up and finding out that he had never gotten a home. And so Truett had to be home for 6 months before we could start paperwork again. And at that 6-month mark, we put in our paperwork for Malachi. And so 11 months later, after Truett came home, Shepherd came home. And he's our little shepherd. And
you have to travel for China.
Yes.
You have to be there for 3 weeks, isn't it?
14 days.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not like just a quick decision. It's not a quick trip, go over, pick up Shepherd and bring him back. No. And it's also not inexpensive.
It's a lot of money. And I will tell you, Ryan and I do not have storehouses of U.S. dollars laying around. We have, like you referenced, adopted 4 times, 3 of them internationally, which is significantly more than domestic. And God has provided every single time. Specifically for Shepherd's adoption, we were asked to speak by a local church about adoption for a series that they were getting ready to do in their congregation. And in the middle of that interview, they surprised us that it was not an interview for that. It was to tell us that they wanted to give us $5,000 for the adoption of Shepherd, and that they had a member in their congregation anonymously match that and give us another $5,000 towards Shepherd's adoption. And so God just provides. I want to read this.
But doesn't that make sense? Because they are God's children. He is going to provide for his children. You just had to be there with an open heart and an open home and talking to God and just saying, yes, God, we will. We're going to receive the blessings you give us, you know? Yeah,
and just walking in faith, knowing that he's going to provide when it needs to be there. I want to read this verse. It's Psalm 66, 5 and 6. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads forth the prisoners with singing. He really does set the lonely in families specifically. You know, he had our children, I believe, set aside for us to set in our family. I believe that from before the foundation of the world, they were little Morrises, and God just had a different way of bringing them to our family. And I believe the overarching picture of adoption, you know, that we see in the gospel, Asher, Truett, Shepherd, and my daughter, who I'll introduce in a minute, they didn't ask to be adopted. But the Lord did that, just as I didn't ask to be adopted by God, but I was his child and he brought me in. And I think that's really important to remember, you know, that this is not Ryan and Lindsey's great adventure of adoption. This is the Lord providentially and sovereignly growing our family with specific children for his glory. And one of the reasons we named Shepherd Zacharias Shepherd, because as we were praying for him, while we had not yet gotten to go back for him, we would often just pray through, you know, the psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is his shepherd, this little boy's shepherd. He's with him, he's not left him, he's not forsaken him. And so that's just a reminder to us that the Lord was his shepherd before we were there. And then his middle name is Zacharias, which means the Lord remembered. And that's something I really held on to after beholding his little face there in that orphanage, that he was not forgotten to God. He was created by God and he was remembered by God. And that the Lord was and is caring for him and taking care of him.
You know, the other thing I think is neat, you said there were 4 portfolios given to you, 3 initially, 3 initially sent to you, and you're like, how do we choose?
Yes.
How do we decide?
Yes.
So here you went with Isaiah, who became Truett.
Yes.
And then
Malachi.
It was through going to the you didn't have to choose. No. God had chosen ahead of you.
Yes.
And Malachi, who became shepherd, did not have to be in that room. You didn't have to recognize him or see him, but God had it planned ahead of time.
Yes.
So it is truly, God chose them for you.
Yes.
Just as he chooses our birth children for us, he chooses these adopted children too. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I will say, while we were never uncomfortable with special needs adoption, something that had come into my mind as, I think that might be for somebody else, I think that might be too challenging for us, was older child adoption. I wasn't against it. I just didn't feel like that's where God had us. And while I was there getting Truett, so first time in China, my children, they're all from the same orphanage. It's a huge building with plus or minus 600 kids in it at a time. It ebbs and flows a little bit. All of the older children started coming down from the upper levels and start going outside to get some fresh air while I'm doing the paperwork for Truett. And there they are, the beautiful ones that I thought, oh, that might be too hard. Oh, I don't think that's what God's calling us to. And again, you see their faces, you behold who they are. They're not just a statistic. They're not just a paragraph you read about how older children, have experienced more trauma and can be harder to assimilate into families. They're people, and they're creations of God. And so while God perfectly ordered Truett to come home first and Shepherd to come home second from China, he began working in my heart for my daughter. Right, from the beginning there when I saw those older children.
So I think this might be a good place to wrap up for now. Okay. And let's just pray for any children that are waiting, any families that are looking and considering this.
Okay.
And then we'll start back up again and finish your story, I think.
That sounds great.
So would you like to pray for these families?
I'm just gonna pray using this verse first, and then I'll go into prayer. It's Ephesians 1:4. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love he predestined us to be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves. Lord, I thank you that you are the author of adoption, Lord, and that adoption is a picture of the gospel and of you loving your people and bringing them into your family. I thank you that you have adopted me, and I thank you that you have given our family the blessing of experiencing adoption here on this earth. I do pray for listening ears today, that you would prick the hearts of people that might be sensitive to this or leaning towards this, that you would prompt them to pray and ask you for guidance. I pray for boldness for them, that they would, if they feel you calling them to adoption, that they would trust you with their money, and all the practical parts that go into adoption, that they would trust you with their emotions, and being able to parent children that might have different abilities. I do pray for all of these precious ones that are waiting, precious ones that you have created, that you have fearfully and wonderfully made exactly the way that they are. And I do just pray that you would continue to be their good shepherd, thank you that you remember them. And I pray that you would place them and set them in families for your glory. Amen.
Amen.
I hope that you've been encouraged or challenged in your faith today, and that something we discussed prompts you to grow deeper in your walk with the Lord. If it has, make sure you tell a friend so they can grow along with you. And if you or a friend would like to be a guest and share about God's faithfulness in your life, please email me at podcast@tendingfields.net. Because when we tell of God's faithfulness, we never run out of stories.
Whatever is true.